Okay, what we're going to take a look at this time is we're going to take a look at this date field. Now, if we lived in an ideal world, then what we would do to take care of a date property is we would give it a type, and let's just pass through the type and set this equal to, and we'll need to put this inside quote marks, and we're going to say that this is an input type of date. And if we go across to Chrome, then what we can see inside Chrome is we've got the Chrome date picker, and this is not too bad actually. And we can go and select our dates, and pretty straightforward. We've got our year drop down and we can select different years, and we can go back. Perfect. But let's take a look at what this looks like in Safari. And if I go across to a Safari browser, I'm on a Mac, so I'm just going to demonstrate this one different type of date. And every different browser implements the HTML5 date picker in a different way. And if we take a look at how Safari implements it, well, they haven't actually bothered. They've not done anything with it. It's just a text field, effectively. So what I'm trying to say is we can't rely on the HTML5 date picker, because different browser manufacturers have all done different things to implement it. If you took a look at this input on Edge, if you're on Windows, then you'll get an entirely different experience completely. So what we need to do with dates, and we've needed to do this since the beginning of the computer age it seems, is we need to use JavaScript to create a date picker. And the ngx-Angular package we use does come with a date picker. So we're going to make use of that one. And in order to use this, what we'll need to do is we'll need to go back to VS Code, and we need to open up our shared module, and we need to import something from ngx-bootstrap. So what we're going to add is the BS date picker module. So we'll say date picker module, and because it's an Angular bootstrap component, we need to specify for roots inside here. And no matter what I do, I cannot get things to import successfully inside this file, so I'm going to import, and we're going to say BS date picker module from, and then we specify ngx-bootstrap / and then date picker. And what's this complaint? And it's telling me it's got no exported member BS date picker module. Did I mean BS date picker module with a lowercase p? Yes, thank you, I did mean that. And let's also adjust that down in here as well. Apparently date and picker are all one word now, which is news to me. Okay, but we've got this now available for us to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another custom reusable input for this, just in case we need date functionality anywhere else in our application. And we'll create another reusable input inside our forms folder. So I'm just going to open up the terminal. And what we'll do is we'll create a new component and say nggc, and this time we're going to use date inputs, and we're going to specify to skip the tests, and press return. And let's go and take a look at what we need to do inside here. So we'll go to our date input components, and just like the text input, we're going to implement the control value accessor, we'll remove the ng on init, and we're going to implement this interface. And we're going to remove the method that's not required, the set disabled state. We don't need that. And what we'll do is we'll also just remove the code that's going to throw an exception if we attempt to use this without removing these particular lines. And let's just tidy things up. Now this one's slightly different, a tiny bit more complicated, because we're going to be using the date input component from ngx-bootstrap. And if we go and take a look at the documentation for this, and we'll take a look at the date picker inside ngx-bootstrap, and we get an example of how to use it. We've installed that, and then we get some examples of what this actually gives us. And it gives us a fairly well-styled date picker where you can select from the dates, and pretty straightforward to use. We've got a year drop down where we can select various different years and the months, etc. But the good thing about this is that it's the same on Safari, as Edge, as Internet Explorer, whatever browser it is, it's going to be the same experience for the users, unlike what would happen if we use the HTML5 date picker. And we've also got different themes here as well, so we can choose different colors, and we're going to go for the red one, which kind of matches the styling that we're going for in our app. So let's take a look at what we need to do inside here to configure it. Once again, we'll take an input as a label, and we'll call it label, going to be a type of string. And what we'll also do is we'll create another input that we'll use called maxDate. And this is going to be a type of date. Because what we want to do, for example, is we want to say that you have to be over 18 to be able to use our website. And what we'll do is we'll add a max date to show the earliest date that the date picker will show. And then what we need to do is also do what we did with the input. We need to make this self so that the dependencies are injected locally and it doesn't try and get this ng control from somewhere else in the dependency tree. And we'll call it ng control, and we'll say ng control. And then inside the constructor, we'll say list.ng control dot value accessor equals lists. And what we also need to do for our date picker is we need to provide it with some configuration. And if we take a look at any of these components, then what we do here is we pass this a bsconfig, and we use partial in this case. And I'll explain what that means. So what we'll do is we'll go back here and we'll use bsconfig, and what we'll specify is partial, and then we'll add the bs date picker config. And when we use partial, what we are really saying here is that every single property inside this type is going to be optional. We don't have to provide all of the different configuration options. We can only apply, or we can only provide a couple of them, and that's going to be fine. If we didn't use partial, then we would have to provide every single possible configuration option they've put inside there. So we use partial to achieve that. And then what we'll do is that we'll say this.bsconfig equals, and then we provide this with some configuration options. So what we'll say is that the container class is what we use to give it a theme, and we're going to say theme-red. And there's 6 different colors I think you can use for this. And the other configuration option is going to be the date input format. How do we want this displayed inside our date picker? And what we'll do is we'll say dd/mmmmyyyy as the display format. And this just means the days as numbers, as in 12, 13 as 1, 3, 1, 2. The month is going to be in long format, so October, September, January, all in long format. And the year obviously is going to be 1999. So then what we need to do is head over to the component for this. So we'll open up the date input component HTML. And what we're going to do for this is we're going to create a div with the class of form group. And we'll add an input, and its type is going to be text. And what we'll do is we'll bring this down because we're going to add quite a few properties inside here that we get from our date picker. So we'll add the class.isInvalid first of all, because that's going to be applied if they don't specify a property for the date. And what we'll do is we'll use the ngcontrol.touched, and we'll use the ngcontrol.invalid, and then we'll apply that class. We also need a normal class inside here because this is going to be a form-control. And then we need our actual form control, and this is going to be equal to ngcontrol.control. And then we'll need our placeholder, which we'll use as our label. And then what we need is the BS date picker directive. So I'll say BS date picker, and it doesn't look like we're getting the IntelliSense for this. We should do. And what this is going to suggest is that we've forgotten to do something. And in this case, I've been quite good up to now with making sure I always remember to export, but in this case I've forgotten. So what we need to do is export the BS date picker module from inside here, and what this should mean is that then we get our BS date picker and now we can see the different options that we have. So that means that we've got access now to this. What we'll do then is we'll pass in our bsconfig that we created, and we'll set this to bsconfig. We'll also set the max date equal to the max date, and all we need to do then is just add our validation feedback. So what we'll do is we'll just give this a div and a class of invalid-feedback. And what we'll do is we'll just add the conditional here. So we'll say a-ngif. And inside here we can say ngcontrol.control.errors, and then the optional chaining, and then we'll specify required. And what we can do here is say that the label is required. And then what we can do, we can head back to our register component, and what we'll do for our date of birth, instead of an app text input, we'll change this to date, and of course change the closing tag to date as well, and we'll remove the type because we don't need that anymore. And let's just remove that, and let's see how we're doing. So if we go across and click on register and we click on a date of birth, we can see that we're now getting our date picker, and we can select different dates, we can select the different years, and so on and so forth. Not bad. But what we want to do is say that our site is over 18s only. So what we'll do, we'll head back to VS Code. So what we also want to do, and we'll head to our register component. We're getting a bit busy at the top here, but we'll go to our register components, and inside here, when we initialize this form, what we want to do is give or create another property in here. We'll just say max date, and this is going to be a type of date. And inside the ng on init, what we'll do is we'll say this.maxDate equals a new date, and then we'll say this.maxDate.set full year, and then we can say this.maxDate.get full year, and then we can say -18, and this will mean that our date picker doesn't allow any selection of a date less than 18 years ago. And then what we need to do inside our register component is we also need to pass that max date property. So we'll say max date equals and max date. And if we go check this out, what we should find is that if we click on our date of birth field, then we start from September 2002, and no dates newer than this are available for selection. We can only go backwards in this case, and we can pick from earlier years. But if they're under 18, then I'm saying they won't be able to register. There's nothing to obviously stop them lying about their date of birth. But inside our date picker, it's only going to accept dates over 18. We now have a date picker we can use in our application. So what we're going to take a look at next, because we've got additional properties inside here, we're going to need to take a look at updating our API register methods, and we'll take a look at that next.